the rate of consumption or depreciation, which therefore comprises a singular fact of economy, itself, and itself alone, not only sufficing to sustain all conceivable prosperity at minimal cost, but which singular fact of monetary solution likewise singularly maintains the one inseparable, perpetual one-to-one-to-one relationship between representative circulation, remaining value of represented property, and remaining obligation to fulfill every original commitment in respect to the considerations of every prospectively affected person, as itself and itself alone necessarily maintains the integrity of the resultant currency in respect to the considerations of every actual creditor and actual issuer or obligor alike. 5. Preservation of the vital scope of liberty requires a permanent divorce from the lies of purported banking. The vital objects of liberty, prosperity, and justice cannot be achieved, therefore, but by reversal and rectification of injustices, and by complete divorce from the purposed lies of purported banking in its intentional and utterly corrupt obfuscation of the currency. So in our mandate, this is our proof of the facts of the severest crimes against the people in an intentional obfuscation of the currency perpetrated by evasion of a fact of singular solution to the categoric faults of the present pretended economy. And of course, these are the issues which we must understand if we are to unite upon solution and to stand for one and one solution only. Our mandate likewise proves a fact of singular solution. But before we elaborate further on this vital element, faced with what we are, we must understand that even as we can rightly anticipate that we, those who will understand and stand for the only possible monetary rectitude, are an inherent omnipotent majority, or a claim of what is no more or less than an inherent human right, derives equally great force in a further claim that we are sovereign individuals, that the individual is sovereign, even regardless of a prospective opposing majority, however wrong that prospective opposition might be. So another thing we need to understand to put all this into perspective is how the weight of our claims is to prevail from this claim of individual sovereignty, and how we claim it in section 123 of our mandate for mathematically perfected economy and absolute consensual representation. Sovereign rights of the individual. So we declare these our undeniable reasons, and we secure a necessary fact not only of a common prevailing authority, but of individual prevailing authority, by a fact that ostensibly just consensual rule can only exist by a potential recognition of justice, which is only ultimately reflected by a majority, if and only if a just majority ultimately exists, and if and only if that potential majority exists by itself, resolving justice to one enduring conclusion, which only concurs with reasoning which is neither different, better, nor therefore more potent than that of a just individual. By this very principle, we therefore claim and establish immediately an existent fact of our individual rights to mathematically perfected economy and absolute consensual representation. However potentially recognized or even purportedly disputed, or merely opposed without qualifiable justification by others. We further claim in its consequences that indifference to these vital objects is an offense against every just person, that under the present circumstances, indifference produces the same consequence as ever unjustifiable opposition. We therefore claim likewise that to seize such criminal and destructive offenses against us, and to reach eventual justice, we must claim that a fact of willful denial of vital principle exists in every person who refuses to join this mandate, all of whom, therefore, must be held responsible for dissolving from their immediate and future possession the full measure not only of the artificially escalated and imposed public obligations to which they have thus ascribed and not paid, but to further resolve from their immediate and future possession every cost and consequence which has artificially sustained the present exploitation to our present and further detriment. According to these indispensable standards of absolute consensual representation, then, so too do we prove our only and necessary means to this justice. For the aforesaid purposed irregularities are indeed the very means by which the present crimes are perpetrated. So we claim our human rights, even as sovereign individuals, to prevail even over a prospective majority opposition, because nothing establishes justice but a proof of justice. Likewise, we may wonder how we are possibly to abolish a whole gargantuan body of unjust law under legislatures bent still on denying us representation. In part to address this need, then, we extend the vital means to absolute consensual representation in Section 1.4 of our mandate. Section 1.4, Vital Extension of Means to Absolute Consensual Representation. 1. Necessary outlawing of any potential means of instantiating crimes against us. As the present crimes against us were imposed by breach of promise, deception, and denial of public affirmation, and as these crimes can only persist above a knowledgeable, apprehending public by perpetual breach of promise, deception, and denial of public affirmation, and as these crimes exist, therefore, wholly by breach of authorizable power, thus, in order to preserve every intent of just rule by consent of the governed, no prospectively conducive means or juncture for affirmation, rejection, or refinement of rule or its consequences can be denied. 2. Necessary scope of absolute consensual representation. Thus, every means of rendering absolute consensual representation prescribed herein shall be exercised not only in all matters henceforth, but in review of the entire body of prior rule, with a natural purpose and consequence of this review understood explicitly to be eradication of a vast body of unjust law, regulation, and government, with a minimal body of remaining law to be consolidated purposely into the least, most just, most economic, and most efficient design, all with the fullest accountability, and indispensably, therefore, with commensurable penalty and liability for the consequences of every violation of common representative principle. In section 4.1d, therefore, we make evasion a severe criminal transgression of this act, treason. Evasion of reasonable accountability in either the pursuit or the performance of office or agency, being adverse to the very purposes of just government, shall be severe criminal transgression of this act. So we provide for this necessary reconstitution of law in section 5. 1. Mandatory standards of reconstitution and criminality of failure to meet standards. All ostensible law and regulations, at least beyond, if not including, an existing national constitution as affected by this effect, shall be subject to public affirmation and periodic reaffirmation, to all further conditions established by this amendment, and particularly to an ever-implicit obligation to eradicate all possibility of injustice, however assumed to be isolated, improbable, or minute, and any and every case of negligent or abusive failure of the government to provide a full and legitimate accounting to legitimate petitions for redress of grievance or further perfection of the law shall be severe criminal transgression of this act. Section 5.2. Repeal of prior monetary standards. Prior monetary standards or purported economic systems are hereby repealed and replaced. Thus, in Section 7, we establish the perpetual and inviolable obligations of economy, adherence to means, scope, and distribution of taxation, and eradication of exploitation. It shall be the perpetual and inviolable obligation of the people, and of all branches, officers, and agents of government, to ensure absolute economy, to reasonably minimize the costs of effective government across all cases, to tax the people most directly, automatically, and commensurably for no more than actual services rendered and willfully accepted or consumed, to restrict the burden of costs to those who willfully cause or incur them, and to protect the people, their affairs, national resources, and industry at all times from all possibility of exploitation.